one thing I want to discuss is you played Champions League, right?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
In
And
Europe
by the way,
and in CONCACAF with you.
You did both. Look at that. And
silver
I will
medalist.
say,
Silver medalist.
That's right. Let's not bring up that game. I'm still bitter about that one. But I think for like in that era, there were very few American players that had ever played Champions League.
Like still to this day, every time I hear that Champions League song, I still get the goosebumps. Like I'm coming out of the tunnel, because like they used to play that Champions League song on TV when you'd watch it, and the Heineken banner would come across. And you'd see them walk out on the field, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. And then you don't realize it, but in the stadium, they're blasting that through the speakers too, right? And so that it's happening on the field. And I remember coming out of like my first game, walking out of the tunnel, and it's as loud as you think it is. It's as like intense as you think it is. And that music is playing, and it is just like, woo, like it is like, it's a lot. It was great, dude. That was one of, like if not the best like moments in my career. UEFA Champions League would definitely be up there.
At what point in time did you realize your time was up with Rosenborg?
So had the bad injury. Wouldn't say the injury itself was that bad, but had a very bad recovery from the injury, let's say. And when you're playing at like a team that's that high level at that time, right? Like everyone who's playing is at the top of their game. You know what I mean? There's not guys coming back from injury. I hadn't played for almost 2 years, and it was one of those things where I had lost kind of a lot of confidence in the medical staff, and I didn't know. And this is not a knock at Rosenborg at all. Like it's just the nature of like injury and the nature of kind of the psychological aspect it takes on you. I just didn't feel like I didn't trust my rehab there. I didn't trust that I was going to get better there. You know what I mean? And so, and they were really good about it, where they like, I went to them and I was like, I think I need to be traded to like, maybe a smaller club where I can like rebuild myself and come back up, and they were like, I still had like 3 years left on my contract, and they were like, yeah, we'll try and find you a club. And they were really like willing to work with me and that sort of thing. But it definitely, after the injury and the not playing for 2 years, like it took a toll on you, where I was like, I needed a change.
So you went from Norway playing the Tippeligaen to Denmark, the Superligaen, and like, we talked about cultural differences, like things you dealt with racism, and obviously you dealt with some issues with medical staff. Like I think that kind of goes hand in hand with like the culture, right? It was just different how they dealt with things. What was it like going to Denmark now? Is this part of your next chapter?
I remember getting there, and I Denmark's lovely. The people are very like sweet. They're a little bit more reserved. They're not quite as like in your face, like, happy go lucky. But I think they're also very like, once they warm up to you, they're very endearing and very like caring. It just takes a while to warm up, right? And so I remember going to this small town again in Viborg, but it actually was next to a larger town, Aarhus, and so I ended up like commuting back and forth from Aarhus, because my wife now, but my girlfriend at the time was teaching at the university in Aarhus, and so we were commuting from the city to like go play with a small club. And Viborg was like, how do I describe this? It was very much a small town feel, but a little bit more like blue collar type of town. You know what I mean? Where people a little bit more hard nosed, people a little more gruff, but playing there, it's funny. Like when I'm thinking about it now, I find myself comparing Viborg to Sogndal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And very two very different teams, but like the feeling in Sogndal was like, oh, everything we get is like a bonus. In Viborg, it was different. Like everything that went wrong was the international players' fault, and everything that went right was the domestic players that caused it. You know what I mean? And so it kind of felt as if coming in that like I was one of these international guys, and every time something went wrong, it was something to do with us.
Dude.
But
Well, like,
you know,
I could totally like relate because, well, in Norway on my team, it was like I went from, in MLS making, the most I made in MLS was like $50,000 a year, right? That was like my third year. I had started at $10,000 a year, right? Not even a livable wage. And, I made it to a livable wage, but then I went to Norway and all of a sudden I was the highest paid player on the team. Whereas in MLS, like I would have been like, near the bottom of
yeah,
the first 11, right?
food chain, yeah,
And like, and so like that, it puts a target on your back, I think, in the locker room
yeah.
because everybody knows how much you're making. The players are all talking to like the agents.
When I went to Norway, right, the true test of like once you've like made it into the team, where like the domestic guys think like, oh, he's gonna be here for a while, you know what I mean? Is when one of the domestic guys invites you out for dinner, right? He says like, come eat dinner at the
Mhm.
house, you know what I mean? And so if I remember, like Songdal, it took about I'd say like I'd say 6 weeks before I got the true like dinner, like come over to have dinner type of thing, because it was one of the guys that didn't speak English well, and so this was definitely a push for
Oh,
him. You know what I
and you're
mean?
not very, and you're not very likable too. So I think I could see why it would take
True,
that
it's true. I get it. But I remember
long.
when I was in Denmark, it took 6 months. It took 6 months before I got that
Oh my
dinner.
God, are
Yeah,
you
yeah.
serious?
And that was yeah, and that was 6 months of and that wasn't
Uh,
unusual for the Denmark. That was they just
for
that's how
sure.
they are. Like it just takes longer. And I remember one of the biggest things that when we were playing together, and that's one of the things I appreciate about it is like I also felt that way that like if there were new guys coming who were like abroad, like from abroad or didn't speak English as well, like you had to put out like a you know a like a bridge to them because like
Mhm.
it's really hard being an international. It's really hard being an immigrant. That's what it is. Like you're an immigrant. You don't know the culture. You don't know anything here. So like you need the people there. If you really want them to like integrate and be part of the team, you have to bring them in to be part of the team.
Yep.
And it's like a perfect microcosm. Like the idea is that like you have to put that bridge out. Otherwise, they'll never join the team. They'll never be a part of it, and you're not going to get the full benefit of them being here because they're talented.
Yeah.
You brought them here for a reason. You know what I mean? And so like if you want to make them work and want to make them succeed, you have to like integrate them. And I remember that
Yeah.
happened like when I was in Norway. We had some African guys on the team, and we would be in meetings like you said, like where the coach is telling us stuff that's going on. I had been there like I think 3 months earlier, right? And I had learned a little bit of Norwegian, and so like the guys that came in were from Ivory Coast, and so they only spoke French, and so like I spoke a little bit of French, and so I remember we'd be in tactical meetings, and the coach would be speaking Norwegian to me, right, and then he would expect
Mhm.
me to turn and translate it into French for the other guys, right, and this was like happening for like 2 months, and I was like, listen, you got to put me on payroll as a translator, or you got to either teach these guys Norwegian or you learn French. Like something's got to change here because going through me is not how this is supposed to go. I'm not a
It's so
coach.
ridiculous. No, it's so ridiculous. Like some of these clubs would just expect you as, another foreigner to, integrate these guys into the team, regardless
Yeah.
of how you interacted with them, if you liked them, if you didn't, if you spoke their language, it was like, you have to do it. And it's like, that's not even fair. Like you need to pay me
Yeah.
more money to do that because I'm doing extra work,
Yes.
and but they just expected you just to do it, just
Yeah.
be a good teammate and take care of us
Yeah.
for us. I thought it was just so funny because yeah, the players they would bring in, at odd, it was like they would bring him in, and they were just like literally like these guys. These were young guys who were in their teens
Yeah.
from a different country. They didn't even know how to like find an apartment, right? Like I was
Yep.
I was in my early 20s, so it was like I had experience in college, and I could logistically figure those things out, right? These guys had no clue, and so they would
Yeah.
stay in the hotel, that team hotel, for like a whole year, right?
Yeah. It's
And it was like
crazy.
they would never get an apartment, they would never
Yeah.
integrate. It was like, oh,
It's
so
crazy.
so you had the opportunity then to go back stateside to Salt Lake, like. I remember when you came in, you came in it was '08 you came in?
Oof. Was it '08? Yeah, I mean '08 sounds right.
But it was like
My
mid, but it
me
wasn't. It was like mid-season. It wasn't like right when the season started. I don't think you were there preseason, right?
no, but I don't know
Yeah,
at what
I
point in
don't.
the season it happened. But would it have been the
I'm
summer?
seeing July. I'm seeing July 2008 as per
Yeah.
for Wikipedia. So
Oh,
you
nice,
came in
nice. Yeah, it would have been the summer then.
mid-season.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And what were your
and
first like?
dominated and raised the level, raised the level.
You did come in. It was funny because you came in to RSL at a time. It was the perfect time because we were like, you have that like, when you bring groups together, you have like, the storming, the norming, conforming, right? And we were
Yep.
still like kind of like storming, or trying to figure out what like we were gonna be. Jason had like an idea of like formation, right, and identity, which was really helped us, I think, just for our brand and to know who we were. But
Yep.
like we were still figuring it out in '08. So like, you came into like, this style of soccer we're playing, a back four, with a diamond midfield and then, two up top. And
Almost three on
you
top. We almost
understood
had the
tactics.
wingers too, with like yeah. Because
Yeah, well,
it
I mean,
felt
if you
like
sent both
that
outside.
Rosenborg. It felt like that Rosenborg four
Mhm.
three three, right? Like the diamond was a
Yeah.
three in the midfield, and then you had our
Yep.
wingers who were got high guys that were high, right? So it felt like a four
Yeah.
three three. So tactics wise,
See, that's
it
coming from a
fit
guy
really
who's
well.
who's very offensive minded. I'm like, I consider those backs defenders for one. But yes, you're right. Your job was the funny part about the best part about the way we played though was like, I remember you talked about that packet that you got, going to
Yeah.
Rosenborg that had, all the principles of play,
Mhm.
where you're supposed to be at certain phases of the game. And with Salt Lake, it wasn't quite that in depth, but it was like Jason came to me the first day I came on the team. He was like, "This is what a center back is supposed to be on this team. You're supposed to be able to defend crosses, okay? Because we're giving away space in the wide areas because we only have three
Mhm.
midfielders really, and they're going to have to
Yep.
shift,
We
and
were
they
tight
can't
in the
always do
middle.
that shifting. So we just have to deal with crosses, which I was like, that's great. Like I can do that. That's like a part of my game, right? And
Yeah.
you came in as a winger slash outside back who could fit that mold really really well. You can cross the ball well. You can kind of get up and down. Your fitness level was questionable at times, but but what were your first like? What were your first thoughts of like the group when you came in to Salt Lake?
Well, it felt very much like Jason had a vision, right? Like when we would have those conversations, he was like, "This is what I want us to look like," And as much as that sounds like a simple thing to do, it's not. Like you have to have a supreme confidence in your formation, in your strategy, in order to stick through it, like through thick and thin, and to say like, "This is how we're gonna play." You know what I mean? And so I remembered kind of feeling like one, like Salt Lake was a perfect place for me because like I had family there and it was a good situation for me. And
Yeah,
two,
that's right.
the conversations with Jason were like very much this is what this team is going to do. And he had those that phrase up on the locker room. That Latin. Do you remember what that phrase was?
I remember what it. I couldn't say what it was in Latin, but it was "Fortune favors the bold," right?
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
it was like one of those things where you could tell there was passion there. There was something
Yeah.
he wanted to bring to this club, and he was building it from the ground, so to speak, and everything was new, and he was bringing all the players he wanted. So it felt like you were part of something that he was building, and that felt good. Like that was exciting.
It was interesting because you talk about the components we were putting together on that team. Like everybody had experience at some point in their careers. Like Winger was had 3 or 4 years already in the league. Kyle Beckerman had a ton of experience. Nick Romano had a ton of experience. Thomas and Olave had played in South America multiple different years. Javier as well. Like so, it kind of felt like we we brought together a group of like pros who were, you know, veterans, but not like, past the prime, like just at the
Yeah.
prime, just before the prime. We were all kind of ready to kind of hit things. I remember the way we bonded was through shared injuries that off season. You remember 2008 going into 2009? So you had a shoulder injury that you had to deal with, which
Yeah.
was quite extensive.
Horrible.
I was, it was. I had a, I had a, comparatively speaking, I had a really easy injury. I just had the bone spur taken out of my ankle that the Norwegians just didn't want to deal with. I had to come back and deal with here, and and my timeline for recovery was like I want to say it was supposed to be like 4 to 6, and I was done in like 2. And you, on the other hand, oh my God,
I would say that was
I was
largely due to the excellent care and motivation that I provided you throughout that experience. So, if that's your way of asking, yes, you're welcome, Borch.
and also it took you probably so much longer to get back to full fitness because I was chirping at you the entire time about how hard it was for you to deal with all the pain you were going through, and you definitely milked it. Don't be honest, you milked a lot of that pain. It was
No,
you'd
dude,
come
that
into the
was
training room,
that
and
was
you'd be like, it hurts so much. I don't want
that
to do
shoulder.
it.
I had 3 surgeries on my knee. 2 years didn't play, and I will still say that shoulder was the worst rehab I've ever done.
Oh, it was
Worst.
awful. And
It was
we actually
awful.
shared your we stayed at your parents' house during
Yep.
that rehab. I
Yep.
think your wife wanted me to look after you because she was worried that you'd take too many drugs.
And then,
I remember we played video games like well
yep.
into the night, like multiple days of that week.
Yep.
It was hilarious. But you know what I do want to bring up is
Hmm.
prerequisites at this point in time.
Oh
So
God.
we were rehabbing with the ballet dancers from, I can't remember what the name of their organization was, but
Ballet
it was
West.
like Ballet West. That's right. And we didn't know these athletes before. We got to know them. We were like, oh my God, ballet is like so much higher of a level than soccer is in terms of having like you're having to like train for like 8 hours a day versus we're
Yeah.
like in and out in like a couple, right? And like the level of focus and commitment, we were like blown away. And we're having these fun conversations with Michael Bearden at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I remember I remember I'm sitting there doing my exercises in this training room. You're doing your PT over there, and Michael's asking you questions, and he, he you're talking about going back to
School.
school, right? To
Yeah.
med school. And he
Yeah.
mentioned prerequisites potentially ending,
Expiring. Yeah.
expiring, and
Yeah. Floored
and
me.
the room kind of just like stopped, and I just looked at you, and
Well,
the
I
look
mean,
on your
so
face.
so like let me give you a little background. So my whole reason for coming back to the States was that I was worried I would not really ever get back to the level I had before. And so I was coming back to play soccer, but then also to start prepping for if I had to have another career change or do another aspect of my life. And part of that had been like going back to school and getting another degree or figuring out how to like go into medicine or anything that I want to do. How do I do it? And I was like, I graduated from school, although by this point it was like 9 years before or something. And I was like, oh, I've gone to school, I've gotten these prereqs, so really I just need to fill out this part here and there, and then I can like, jump back into it. And I was like, great, awesome. I'm gonna go to school part-time, I'm gonna play soccer, everything's gonna be perfect. And then it just happened to be that during a very dark period for me with this shoulder injury, Borch, that someone decides to tell me that
Drops a bomb
essentially
plan.
all of my prerequisites that I had gone to school for were no longer valid and that I would have to start again from scratch. I mean, what do you expect, Borch? That was devastating. Oh, and what is my good friend that I'm bonding with over here do in this moment of like my horrific discovery? It just begins to laugh hysterically.
You said it, man. Like good people do evil things sometimes, Robbie. This is exactly what happened here. How much time do you think that set you back? Was that like a year and a half worth of work that you had to probably go back and do?
No,
or?
that was 4 years. That was 4 years of work. But the idea is that it was 4 years of maths and sciences. And so it was one of those where like if there wasn't a post-back program where they take all of that and just condense it into like a year, and they do it in 18 months essentially.
Yep.
Like you just take it, so you take all of your math and science instead of taking them how you would an undergrad would take them. Oh, you're leaving? Okay. Instead of taking them like how an undergrad would take them, where you like do like English and you do, you know, sociology and you do the other prereqs, you take them all condensed. And if there hadn't been a post-bac program, I would have had to do like another 4 years of like taking it. But because they just condensed it down. So it ended up setting me back actually 15 months because I did it in an accelerated level. So I ended up doing the 18-month program in 15 months. But like, yes, it set me back 15 months. Yeah. That was
the devastation on your face. That was a rough day for you.
When I failed that calculus like exam, I essentially like wrote that dream off. Like I thought it just, you know, maybe I'm not smart enough, maybe I'm not good enough for it, you know, like it just wasn't meant for me, you know. And like meeting, you know, my wife now, whose dad was actually an ER doctor, was like a pivotal moment for me. Not because he was an ER doctor, but because he was one of the first like professional people in that realm who like knew me, like who like actually personally knew me and had like no doubt in his mind that I could do it. Right? Like it was someone else in that field.
He believed in you.
Mentoring me and saying like, listen, like I know you can do this. So like we just have to figure out how to get this done. Right? And that was like pivotal for me because I'd never had that before. Like, you know, we're footballers and like, you know, it's easier to see your success in the football field sometimes when like wins, losses, you know, like goals scored, like there's statistics, there's all these things that you can look at in soccer to say, I'm doing well. You know what I mean? And I feel as if like when you're, you know, chasing after something else that isn't quite as tangible, not as quite as like X's and O's, as in this is how this is going well, it makes it's a lot more nerve-wracking. And so for me, I just didn't have the confidence in that side of things to say to myself, you can do this, right? And so having someone else tell me you can do this was like everything. Like that was everything.
It's funny because I feel like we all need mentors in our life, right? You need like coaches to believe in you. You need like your parents to believe in you. But people who have done it before, who believe in you, like that's like, it's just like so powerful. Let's switch back to soccer. You know, we need to set the table for MLS Cup 2009, right? Because that's there was a moment there that we're going to have to discuss here shortly. What was that season like for you? Because I've got an opinion on that season, and I'm sure you do, but I'm curious to hear what yours was.
That's interesting. So I remember that season being like the regular season was us scraping by, like
Yep.
getting just enough wins, you know, like hitting a stride at just the right time, having moments of terribleness, having moments of brilliance, but like just making it in. You know what I mean? Like we just made the tournament. You know, what were we, like the 7th seed or something? Like we were pretty close to the bottom, weren't we?
We had to cross over to the Eastern Conference because we had like I think we had like a 12-12 record. It was like, you know, we'd won just as many games as we had lost, and we had a few ties over here, but we barely won, got in. You know, I think again on the last, it was like the last game of the season got us in, right? And we thought we weren't going to make it.
Yeah, and I remember that entire season. I actually felt a lot of frustration that season because I felt like we could have been a much better team than we were. And, you know, everyone has their opinions of what you need to do and where this person needs to go. And, you know, and I just felt like we weren't gelling as well as we could have that entire season, you know, and there was moments where it was because of injuries, guys were not playing as much. Some guys, you know what I mean? Like things were moving around a lot. And I just felt like we never really hit our stride. But then I do remember the last couple games of that season feeling as if, okay, now we're starting to put it together. Now we're starting to get it. You know what I mean? And I remember, you know, when we made it in, it kind of felt as if like a little bit of like a validation that like okay, we've made it to the playoffs. Now it's just one game at a time. Like we just have to we don't have to worry about the full season. We don't have to worry about everything else. We don't have to worry about standings. Now we just give it all on the field. You know what I mean? And I think that playoff switch for us was so huge, because I felt like during that regular season we had moments of brilliance and then we had moments of just being horrible. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I don't know. How did you feel about it that season?
No, I don't disagree at all. I feel like we were in that period of just trying to figure out, how to play together. And it was so frustrating because, it was like, man, we'd have these games where we're like, the passing was crisp. We were moving the ball really, really well. We were finishing our chances. Then we had games where it just didn't connect, didn't click. We had, some injuries. I think Kyle was out a majority of that season. I don't know if you remember that. With an injury, and we had some national team call-ups, and it just never felt like it came together. And the one thing I remember about that season is Toronto. We went away to Toronto needing a result, like we had to get a result, and if we didn't, we were, from a percentage wise, it was unlikely that we were going to make it, right? And then I remember going out, to Queen Street, with the guys, and we're out, having drinks and having a good time, we don't know we don't care anymore. It's season's probably over, right? But all of a sudden we get this text hey, I think Red Bulls, beat somebody or lost. I think they lost by some absurd score, and we were still in it. We just had to beat Colorado the next weekend, right? And it was oh my God, it's game on again. Here we go. And then we kind of locked in after that. And I don't know if you remember, we also had between that game and the Toronto game, I think that other game, we had a period of a couple weeks break where we actually were, no, I'm wrong. I'm looking at it right now on Wikipedia. I'm wrong, but we did have a period of a break where we had some extra fitness that Jason put us through. And it was
yeah.
that. Yeah.
I
and it was
that.
We had some,
we
had
like,
some,
what are you doing? We were
God. Do you remember Clint? How much Clint hated that too?
Yes. Yes. Man, the
so
old guys
upset.
complained so hard about that.
They did.
Yeah.
And it was funny because coming from, from both of us playing in Scandinavia, it was those types of sessions were we had those types of sessions once a week where you were just literally not even touching a ball, right? You're just running around a soccer field, and
that
you're
was
having to do
Tuesday
it.
or Wednesday.
Yeah,
Tuesday or Wednesday every week.
Yeah, and I feel like that perspective made us more who cares? We can do anything. Whereas some of those older guys on our team couldn't handle it. We made this run, in the playoffs, and it's unlikely. We beat I think we had Columbus first. We had a 2-game series with them. We ended up going down away to Columbus, right, in that second game, coming back and beating them. And then we had Chicago, which we beat in penalties. Ned's, final penalty to put us through. And then we're in the championship game with LA. Do you remember the lead up to that game, to MLS Cup, and the feelings that you had?
Honestly, it was one of those things where I remember in Seattle, being in the hotel a lot, right? And and just the entire time, we're I felt like we were all in the hotel together, and we're just and the families got to come too, which was they were kind of doing their thing around the city, and I don't remember us doing as much sightseeing and stuff that weekend before. Do you remember that at all? I'm just making sure I'm not hazy on this, but I remember coming into that game, and I think this is one of the beautiful things about MLS, which is a little bit different than Europe, except for maybe the cup system for them, right? Is that our regular season, the champion of the regular season doesn't get the credit that I think they deserve. You know what I mean? They don't hype up the regular season champion as much as they should, because of the fact that is the team that is the best team day in, day out over the course of the entire season.
If you were to ask any American sports fan who doesn't know MLS what a Supporters Shield champion is, they would have no clue, right? That's the regular season champion for MLS. But MLS Cup champion, they would probably know that, right? Yeah. So to your point, yeah.
It's I love the playoffs because it's that cup style feel when you're playing soccer, right? and it's that any given Sunday feel, like any team can win on any day. And I remember when we were getting ready for LA, it was very much the like, this is the Beckham team, right? Like this is the quintessential flagship team of the MLS right now. This is who, like, this is like it was our version of Messi coming over, right? Like he was the guy that was coming in to make the league a name, and he did that. Like he helped put us on the map, which was great. And so I remember this was the team that had Landon Donovan, it had Beckham, and this was the team that like we were facing these juggernauts, and their salaries were like so much bigger than ours, and like we were just this small itty bitty little team, and I honestly feel like we had a little bit of that edge to us by this point, because we had beaten teams that were all ranked higher than us up until this point. You know what I mean? And so we were.
And Columbus Crew was the former champion last year, and we took them out in the playoffs.
And so we had this feeling of like we could beat anybody. You know what I mean? And so I felt like going into that final, I didn't feel like we were playing this big juggernaut team. I just thought like, listen, our team, like on a good day, like we could handle anybody, right? Let's just hope that the good days, during championship day, like, that was the only thing I was worried about. It's just like, if we didn't come to play, then like it would show, because we needed all of our guys to be playing like at their best, and we would be fine. You know what I mean? And I honestly felt like going into that like all the nerves, all that stuff, it wasn't about our tactic. It wasn't about like who we were playing against. It had nothing to do with it. It was entirely, for me, it was like, we just need all our guys to show up. And if all our guys show up, we'll be fine. You know what I mean?
Well, and then we were behind the eight ball a little bit, because Will Johnson, he got sick, right? Prior to that game, I think he played only half, the first half of the game, and he was really struggling. Javier got hurt.
He got hurt, didn't he? Yeah.
Yeah. Beckham, actually, he had a collision with Beckham, and he had to come off the pitch, I think, in the.
I remember, because he was like crying.
Yeah. So we had to make some changes. Ned came in at halftime, and then Clint came in as well for Javier. And I mean, I'm grateful that our bench was like that deep, right? You could bring in like Ned's a stud, Clint's obviously a stud, and you could bring them both in to kind of to help the cause. But I remember the first half being like, it was really, it was tense. It was nerve wracking. It was like every single like pass mattered. You could feel the weight of the game as a championship game. And like, they scored the first goal. We went at halftime, and Jason.
I will point out, it was my guy that scored too.
It was, but it happened. But it happened on a giveaway.
It was a counter, like
it was a counter attack. Beckham played the ball to like Landon, who crossed the ball into McGee on the back post. And it was like, they just caught us off guard. It's still your fault though, dude. Yeah, honestly.
Where's my center back? You're supposed to deal with crosses.
It was a great cross. It was over my head. I'm not 6'7" like these Norwegian guys. So like I remember going to halftime, and Jason's comment at halftime was just like, it was interesting because you could take it in one of two ways. He said, guys, this was never going to be a 0-0 game, right? And I was like, we're good enough to hold them to like 1-0, Jason. So like come on.
Thank you for not trusting our defense.
Yeah. But on the other hand, he was like,
so the defenders, all the defenders were like, oh, thanks.
Yeah, I know. And I was like, all right, so where are we going with this? It was like, we got to get the next goal. We go up in the second half, I think with the second half was different. And then like, because I feel like we started growing into the game, and a lot of it had to do with our midfield. It was like, I just remember at one point in the game, like getting the ball in the back, like it was one of those like, they had possession, they had a chance, and the ball kind of fell to me, and I had the option to like just like bomb it long, right? And I was under pressure, but Kyle was like, dude, play me the ball, and he was like, he wanted the ball and to just start controlling things, and I was like, I threaded it through to him. He turns and we're out, and it was like the same thing with like Ned and Andy, and we were literally dominating their midfield, and their outside backs had no clue how to handle our diamond, right? And it was like,
well, it was crazy. I just remember like there would be plays where we would be attacking, right? And like our outside backs would end up in the box with like I remember there was one where Robbie Finley got a cross in and he missed it. I was right behind him ready to tap it in. I was like, oh my God. And I just remember like
we were comfortable. And it was fun. It was funny because I felt like, yes, the Galaxy could have, counterattacked and scored at any point in time, but like we were in their end of the field. We had a lot of control
turned it on,
of the game. And it was like, it wasn't no longer like a David versus Goliath feel. It felt more like we were.
It was like a team that like needed a goal, and we were pushing to get our goal back.
We were pushing, and we were the better team at that stage in the game, despite how many stars they had. And then we get to PKs, right? Well, let's go to overtime. Overtime, nothing happened in overtime. Not even worth mentioning. Let's throw that away. PKs though, and it's funny because I've never watched the whole game in its entirety. I still haven't. I'm not gonna. Like, I don't need to go back through all this. I've seen the highlights. I remember what I need to remember. But PKs I've watched. Done. But like PKs, I've watched watched those highlights a lot, especially in recent weeks since we just had November 22nd was our 16-year anniversary of that game, and it's crazy, right? And to think of those moments and the PKs that happened, like what was your sense when we were going to the PKs? Like were you confident? Were you kind of like on a knife's edge? What were you feeling?
Well, actually, once we got to the PKs, I remember like I wasn't one of the first five, right? Like I wasn't supposed to be taking the PK, but I was like I want to take a PK. Like I was like feeling like I wanted it, but like I wasn't one of the first five, so I was like okay. Like
which is interesting that you wanted it, because a lot of players don't want it in these scenarios, right? And I look at as a youth soccer coach, seeing like who wants it and who doesn't, and like my son's team, like we've had those PKs, and it's like you just like you have an opportunity either to A, select your players, or B, have them select themselves. Right? Yeah. And do you remember, did Jason select the first five and then let us pick the next? Yeah. So Jason picked the first, but then after that, we just kind of went up, right? I don't think anybody really,
No, because remember we had that talk on the sideline, and he had like the first five, and then after that, he said, who wants to go next? And I was like, I want to go. And I told him I wanted it. But I didn't think it was going to get to me. But I was like, yeah, I'll take one.
And you weren't the sixth, that's for sure.
I was like seventh. Was I seventh? It was seventh, right? Which one was it? Now I got to look it up now.
I can't remember, because it would have been the only two people who didn't take them, or three, would have been me and Homison didn't take two, and then who else was in that group? I feel like everybody else. You might have been eighth. Because then Nick didn't take one either.
Eighth?
No, you might have been eight.
So like it was. Oh yeah, I'm not. You know what? Yes, we'll fast forward through this. But yes, I wanted to take a PK because I was supremely confident in my PK taking skills. So, and I
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're right. You're seventh. You're right. I just checked it.
God. Wow. I mean. You know what?
Look at you. But, you're not as old as you look.
So like I also like once the PKs were happening, and the excitement of the moment and everything's happening, and like someone misses, and then we make it, and then we're like tied, and then we're going, and it's one of those where like I just remember once it finally got to like my slot and we had the chance to win it. It was like, and I was confused. I hadn't kept track of the score well enough to know like what situation we were in. And so like I remember turning to Clint at the time and being like, "Hey, if we make this, do we win?"
Really?
He was like, yeah. Like right before I went up, I was like, "Clint,
I don't
like
know if Clint's the right guy to ask. Did he know? Did he have the answer?"
Yeah, he did. He was like, "Yes." I was like, "Okay." So I just remember like after that being like, "Oh, we can win." And so like I remember walking that that tunnel you walk when you're like going down to take the penalty. If it's not a tunnel, right, then it turns into distraction. Like you got all this stuff going on. It means you're not locked in. And so like as you're walking, you got to turn it into a tunnel. I like the minute he said, "If we make this, we win," I was like, tunnel. like just go, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember walking down there, and like in my memory, there's like no sound. I don't hear anybody. You know what I mean? I'm just walking it down. I see the ball. I see the goal. I don't even know who's in goal, right? Like I remember what his name got hurt, who was like
So
saving
Ricketts
all of
got
them.
hurt. Ricketts
Yes,
got hurt.
Ricketts got
Saunders
hurt.
was in. So they had a bit of
Yeah.
a change in the goalkeeper too. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I didn't even know who was like. Honestly, to this day, the memory is just like soccer ball, goal, and everything else is blurry, right? And
No,
so, like,
hold
I'm
on.
walking
Hold on.
down.
You're missing one important point. Did you? So like I have 3 rules for taking PKs, and I just do this for my kids, right? It's like pick your spot, right? Hit it hard, keep it on frame, right? If you do those 3 things and the keeper saves it, you're exonerated because at least you did your best. Did you pick your spot?
No. No.
What?
Borchers,
What did you?
you're a classic defender taking a penalty. There's no creativity, Borchers. You gotta have some creativity.
Okay,
So
what,
at
you
this
waiting for him
point,
to move?
no. So I know when I go to strike a ball, I've got some good hip movement. You know, I can throw the hips with the best of them, right? And so I was like, I need to fake one way and go the other way. That's what I need to do, because I know that I'm going to make him think I'm going to go one way and I'm going to go the other way, and I just have to hit it like. And as long as I'm confident about that, then like I will execute the maneuver with no problem. The issue becomes, and I think with penalty takers, is if they make their decision and then they hem and they like go halfway, or they like change their mind halfway through, right? Mm-hmm. That's when it like throws. So like you can do like pick a spot, or you can do like throw a fake, whatever decision you're making to do it, stick to that decision. Because then if you're in the middle of swinging and you like, oh, my decision was wrong, and then you like hem, that's when you like screw up, right? So like it wasn't that I picked my spot, but I was like, I'm going to fake right and I'm going to go left, right? Because I know he's either going to go for it or I'm going to like have to hit it strong. And I know because I'm right-footed, if I fake right and go left, that's working towards me. So I was like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to fake right and go left. I felt like if I had tried to pick a spot, then I would have like, I'm going to pick like side netting and I'm going to hit the post. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like if I try and pick a spot, I'm just going to be a little bit off. I'm picking that spot and I'm going to overcorrect. So for me, it was just like, fake one way, go the other way. That's what you're going to do. And so when I stood up and I got there. Knew this. Yeah. When I got there and I was looking at him, I was like, he feels like he thinks I'm going to go right. So I'm going to fake right. I'm going to go left. Right.
But wait,
that's what I did.
Wait. So your hips, and you were doing it with your hips? You were actually trying to like
all in the hips.
Point your tips.
It's all in the hips. God. You've seen these hips. You've seen these hips. They move. They move.
Oh my God! I've seen way too much of those hips in my time. Oh my goodness! We don't even need to go into all the lotion and everything in the locker room.
No, but it was literally like I had decided what I was going to do when I walked up there, and then when I got there, that was when I had made the decision: am I going to fake left and go right, or am I going to go right, like fake right and go left? And so I made the decision: fake right, go left. And so then it was just about executing it.
And when the ball left your foot.
Yeah. That was going in. I knew 100% that was in. I was like, that's in. Like the minute I hit it, I was like, that's on frame. It's where I want it to go. It's in. And so I was like, and so then I was more of like, is he going to get to it? And then he had already gone the other way. And so I was like, oh, we're done. We're done.
You know, at what point in time did you realize it was time to, to sail into the sunset with your career and then move on into the next one?
Well, it actually was a pretty easy decision, because like the entire time I'd kind of been working towards getting ready to go back to school, getting my stuff ready, figuring out the post-bac program, that kind of stuff. And so when I got moved back from Salt Lake to DC, it was great for us because I was finally back with my family, with my wife, because we'd been living apart for the last, I think the last 2 years of my contract was kind of, doing the long distance thing, which really sucked. And so like getting back to DC kind of felt like, oh, it's another step into like, we're both in the same place. Now we can keep working towards that goal of me eventually going back to school, that sort of thing. And, I'm playing for DC now, and hopefully we can kind of, make a couple of years out of this and really enjoy this last couple of years of my career while I'm, prepping for the next stage, And so I remember coming into DC, we did the first preseason together, the first season together, And this is when DC was coming off a run of like not making the playoffs for something like 7 years in a row. Like, you know, they weren't doing great. They had some like pretty decent like young guys, but they hadn't really put anything together, and they didn't have a lot of experience that like was like a winning experience. And so I was kind of brought in to kind of bring that. And I remember that first season, it ended up going pretty well. Like we made the playoffs again after like a huge, you know, period not. And I remember going into our off season, you know, I think we had lost in like the Eastern Conference, was it Eastern Conference Finals, I think. We've gotten pretty like decent, which is great, but like we lost. And so I remember going into our off season kind of meeting, and, you know, Ben Olsen was the coach at the time. He was like, you know, you're one of our older guys. I'd worn the captain's armband a couple times. Like, you know, they were like, you're our older guy. And so we're really ready for you to come back. We're really going to need you building this team next year. And so it'll be great. Like, let's do this. So I went into off season thinking like, hey, you know, I'm going to be able to play another couple of years. Like I'd gone there with the 1 year, and like we were going to see what happened, and it went great. And I was like, I still had a couple of years left on my contract. So I was like, great. And then when I came back in for preseason the next year, they had brought in 3 guys at my position to like try out. and not like guys that are like play other positions. These were like 3 right backs that they brought in. And I was like, I've been a pro at this point for like 14 years. I'm like, I know what that means. Like clearly I am not their guy, and that they are trying to move on from me. And so like they have 3 guys. Like I was like, I'm not going to spend this next year trying to get playing time behind 3 other guys. Like that just doesn't make any sense for me. You know what I mean? And so I was like, okay, I can read the writing on the wall. Like, let me start applying to postbacks, get ready, because clearly they're moving on, and let me do it at a time when they can like recover from it. So let me just do it during preseason. And that way, like I can retire before the season starts, and they'll have gotten their guys. And I was like, great. So I started putting in my applications, did everything I was supposed to do. You know, preseason, you know, comes in, we're finishing preseason, and you know, we have our end of season our beginning of the season meeting, like our end of preseason meeting. And this was unfortunate, but I walk in and, you know, Ben and Chad there, and they're like, all right, Robbie, we're going to need you. You ready? Like, you know, are you ready to start playing? Because I guess evidently they weren't happy with the 3 guys they brought in. And I was like, dude, I'm sorry, I'm retiring. Like I'm not going to play this season. And it didn't go over well initially. I can understand from Ben's perspective that he was a little upset, but he ended up like, you know, forgiving me. And he actually wrote me one of my like recommendations to go to residency. And so he wrote me like a glowing recommendation when I went to residency, which is great. But like, I definitely think he was a little bit surprised and a little bit upset, but I was like, you know what? Like this is just the way football is. And so I actually retired before the start of my second season because I had gotten into the postgrad program at Georgetown.
Now you transition over into this, you know, new phase where you're going from top of your game, professional athlete, right, starter, and you know all the, you know, the feels of that, the ego that comes with all that, to starting from scratch, right, as a student, right, and you're entering in an era where all these students are probably 14 years younger than you, right? Because you had this 14-year career, right? So
Yeah.
what was that like? You know, having to go back to school and be a student.
That was definitely a transition. I mean, I even remember one of the first things that like kind of blew me out of the water a little bit is that, you know, when we were growing up, when we'd study, right, you take notes on like a little piece of paper. You go to lecture, you take notes on a little piece of paper, you know, and now, like, especially when a lot of our stuff was, you know, even like with residency during COVID and stuff, like lectures were like online, and lectures were, you know, videos that you would watch, and then you would like take notes like on your iPad, and everything was electronic, and there was no paper anywhere. And I was like, I don't remember what it feels like to draw on paper anymore. And it was just making that transition it was wild, because, you know, there's so much new stuff that kind of comes up that, you know, that they use, and you'd be trying to adapt your old school ways of like your little, like, you come in with all your notebooks the first day, and like nobody else has a notebook, right? Everyone else just has an iPad. And so like there was definitely that learning curve of the learning curve. Like I was learning to learn again, you know, and that was tough. And, you know, when hanging out with people that are 14, 15 years younger than you, like socially you're just in different places. You know what I mean? Like their plans after school was to go out and like hang out and have a good time, and mine was like take my kid to soccer practice and go pick up my wife from it's just we were in different places, and you get used to like kind of learning in those circumstances. And then when you're, especially this was tough in med school. They have something in their training that was very old school that's called the Socratic method, right? And the thought process is that you teach by asking questions, right? So like instead of just coming to the idea and lecturing about it, you then ask a bunch of questions, and then the person kind of gets to it on their own.
Sure.
Now there's some teachers that are better at it than others. And the ones that are very good at it, you feel as if you're learning while they're asking you questions. And the ones that are bad at it, you feel like they're just like interrogating you, right? And
Sure.
there's a word for it in med school. It's called pimping. You're getting pimped. It's like when someone's coming at you hard over like this question, and they like no matter what answer you give, it's not right, and they keep, and you know what I mean. And I could see that. I think my take on it is that if I'm 15, 16, 18 years younger, like great, I'm a young, malleable student that's willing to like take the heat and deal with it. And here I am, like, I'm a grown ass man, right? Like, and half of these attendings are like either my age or younger, and they're going to be coming at me in my face about like this patient's like cholesterol levels, and I'm like, not having that. You know what I mean? Like, so I definitely.
So how did you deal with that? Were you, instead of just like taking it and being like, I'm so sorry, this is what I think, were you just like, no,
Yeah.
like this is my answer and you can take it?
No, well, I'd give the answer, and if you would say it wrong, I'd be like, okay, that's fine. And it was clearly not the reaction that they wanted me to either get upset or they wanted me to like, grovel or and I just wouldn't. I just sit there blank face, being like, okay, noted, and then I'd move on. And it was just one of those things where I could tell it through some of my professors a little bit where they weren't getting that response. And others were like, yeah. And so I remember it happened a lot on my surgery rotation, which is kind of very well known for it. And I remember one day just getting pimped by, and he was kind of like a legendary doctor for that hospital. And I just remember him pimping me that day, and he ended up, like making a comment at the end that was hugely inappropriate, right? Where he was like, well, if you're not going to answer that, then like you'll never become a doctor, like saying something like that, right? And I remember at that moment I wanted to tear into him, right? Like I wanted to lose it on him, you know what I mean? And then I had to tell myself, listen, you're a grown ass man, like this dude is you don't know what his circumstances are, you don't know, good people do bad things, bad people do good things, like just breathe, walk through it. And like I just remembered that moment. And the reason I remember the moment, not for positive things, because initially I thought surgery maybe would have been my thing. Like I was thinking surgery might, and there's a whole bunch of reasons why it ended up not being, but like that experience was a big part of it, because I knew that this was like a big part of the culture of surgery, and I knew I couldn't take this, like, because it wasn't for me. And so that was the one thing that I felt a little bit. And I don't know if this is a good thing or bad thing, but it was like that, having that experience of knowing what you can handle and what you can't handle was huge in me saying like, okay, I understand this is not for me because I do not want to live my life under these conditions, right? You know that doctors have like a much higher suicide rate than the general population. Like I
didn't know that.
Yeah, doctors are much higher. It's crazy. And it's because like so much of their mental health goes into taking care of their patients and not taking care of themselves, right? And it's like a huge like paradigm shift that I think is on the edge of happening in medicine. And I think actually this whole stuff with COVID and stuff has kind of really slowed it down. But like, the big term they're using now is burnout, right? And trying to deal with burnout, it's so much more than burnout, because like so much of their identity is forced into being a resident. Like, do you know what the term resident means? Like how they came up using it?
No.
So the reason they're called a resident is because in the old days, and this is kind of true now, the doctors, the learning doctors that are in the hospital never leave. They are in the hospital almost 24 hours a day. And so they became residents. And so during their training, they were spending most of their lives in the hospital as part of the expected training, right? And so like now there's been a whole push of like limiting the amount of hours. Like they used to work like 72-hour shifts. Like that was, it was just insane, the stuff that, and even now, like some places still do 24-hour shifts. You know what I mean? They do 12 hours all the time. Like in residency, I did 12 hours all the time, right? Like, and then you do 12 hours like back to back for a couple days. Like, but now they're trying to change back, but like that's where the term resident came from. And so they've created this dynamic of like making your identity of being a doctor as being so much of who you are, right? And I think I'm blessed with the ability of being a non-traditional medical student where I know who I am before I started being a doctor, and I still struggle with it to this day. Like I still struggle with like when something goes wrong with a patient, or like things don't go the way I planned, or even with my best intentions someone still dies. Like we all struggle with that, right? And not internalizing that to make it being like I'm a horrible person because of that is so difficult. It's so difficult, you know what I mean? And I really think there has to be a lot more attention paid to like just healthcare workers in general, people who take care of others, because it's so easy to lose yourself in that care and not realize that you have to take care of yourself first. And
100%.
our system is not designed to produce those type of doctors. Like,
100%.
you know, working for a big conglomerate like health, you know, association, working, you know, doing your board testing all the time, do all the, you know, everything that they put you through is to essentially constantly test you to be like, are you able to do this? You know what I mean? At no point is there like a, should you do this? Do you need to take a step back? You know what I mean? That kind of stuff. And so many of those doctors who don't take care of themselves go down this path. And that's why I think so much of the suicide rate in doctors is so high, is because the system is just designed to kind of burn through them a little bit.
What advice would you give anybody who's coming from, you know, a professional athletics background and trying to get into a new industry, right? Because there's a lot of people out there that have gone from this industry where they're there for 10 to 15 years, or even 3 to 4, and they need a pivot. Like, what would you tell them about that pivot?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is you have so much more to offer than you believe you do, right? So you think you're trying to get them to give you a job. What you're not realizing is that you are exactly what they want. And so they should be trying to get you, right? So that's the first thing. Know your worth. All right. The second part of it is that you have to figure it out. You have to figure out what it is you want to do, right? You've had the benefit of being a professional athlete. You've had this access that being a professional athlete gets you to, that you now have some ability to use those relationships, use those resources to then explore what do you want for yourself, right? And I knew for me, one of the biggest decisions that happened with me kind of becoming a doctor was that I got to experience being a doctor and experience what it was like before I even started. So like doing shadowing, doing like, you know, working as a scribe. Those are all things that when you do that, it gives you that real world experience. And I think what it was for me is that understanding that every job you'll ever take is like, you'll have 99% of the stuff you do. Actually, this is more like this. 90% of it is logistics. It's like paperwork. It's the pain in the ass stuff that you do day in, day out to make something function, right? And then there's that 10% that is everything you wanted it to be, right? That 10% is like why you do it. The 10% is, you know, whatever your goal is in that profession, it's what you're doing, it's what you're achieving, and that's what you want to do. So the 90% of it, you have to find out, is the 90%, doing the 90%, does that 10% make up for it? Is that 10% worth everything that 90% entails? And the only way you really get to know the 90% is if you like experience the job itself and put yourself in situations where you can figure it out. You know what I mean? And put yourself around people that are doing it so that they can tell you. So you have to figure out, is this a job that I really want because I'm willing to do the 90% because I want that 10%. You know what I mean?
Yep.
You know,
Love it.
and for doctors, it's like everyone goes into being in the medical school thinking this is what a doctor is, right? And they have this ideal version of a doctor. You need to turn that ideal version in the real world like version, and then decide, is that real world version still what I want to do?